All right. Well, welcome to this wonderful informational webinar. My name is Tom Shakely, and I'm here with Professor Bill Saunders. And we're going to speak today about a wonderful program, the MA in Human Rights program at the Catholic University of America. So welcome, and thanks for being here and for your evident interest in this program. So, as I mentioned, my name's Tom Shakely, and I am currently the Chief Communications Officer and spokesman for Bishop Burbidge and the Catholic Diocese of Arlington. Right in the neighborhood here with Catholic University. And I myself am a graduate of the MA in Human Rights program at Catholic University and a big fan of it and proponent of it. The Institute on Human Ecology at the Catholic University of America is the nation's leading academic institute committed to identifying the economic, cultural, and social conditions that are vital altogether for human flourishing. Drawing on the Catholic intellectual tradition, the mission of the IHE is to educate students. It's to sponsor multidisciplinary research, and it's to advise church leadership, organize symposia, conferences, and lectures in the academy, but also in the public square. IHE programs challenge the predominant cultural materialist and reductionist worldviews of institutions, policymakers, and opinion formers. These ugly things that stand in the way of prosperity and human dignity that would reduce us to less than we truly are. Professor William Saunders is a graduate of Harvard Law School and has been involved in the issues that we're going to talk about today in public policy, law, and ethics for decades, over 30 years. Uh, Professor Saunders is a regular columnist for the National Catholic Bioethics Quarterly and has written widely on these topics, as well as on Catholic social teaching. He's lectured in law schools and colleges throughout the United States and the world. His latest book is called Unborn Human Life and Fundamental Rights, Leading Constitutional Cases Under Scrutiny. And this was published in 2019. Professor Saunders is the director of the MA in Human Rights program at the Catholic University of America, and he also acts as a consultant to the United States Conference of Catholic Bishops Committee on International Justice and Peace, the USCCB's Committee on International Justice and Peace. And he's the director of the Center for Human Rights, where he works closely with distinguished fellow Chen Guancheng. Professor Saunders, welcome. Glad to be here with you.
Good to see you, Tom. Yeah, I hope everybody listening. Tom is one of the program's graduates we're very proud of, and he's doing something. We'll probably talk about it, but people ask, "What do you do with this degree?" And the degree enables you to do a lot of different things. I mean, Tom has a lot of qualifications that he didn't just get in our program, but our program fits well. And in fact, when we put it together, we thought about it as equipping people to work in diocesan situations around the world. So Tom is doing it. So he's proof positive that it can happen, and really glad to be on with Tom. I believe, Tom, you're still in a graduate program at Catholic University too.
It's true. It's true. Yeah. After I completed the wonderful program in human rights, I went on, and I guess this is a pathway we can talk more about. But I went on
Yeah.
to into the PhD politics, the political theory program at Catholic University. It was really natural kind of segue that the program equipped me well for. So yeah.
Yeah, so that's another thing for those listening. I mean, I imagine we'll have people listening who are both U.S. citizens and non-U.S. citizens, but particularly for an American citizen, you can go right on to a graduate program if you want to. The program is set up to enable you. You make the decisions. You can go to a graduate program. You can go to work for a diocesan ministry. In Tom's case, you can do both, but you don't have to do both. Um, but let's talk more about it. But I just think everybody listening should, here's an example of somebody who's been through the program. So when I'm talking today and answering these questions and talking about the program, I'm inviting Tom to jump in at any point and talk about his experience too, particularly thinking back to what it was as an applicant. I remember Tom was as an applicant. He didn't immediately decide to come. He thought about it, and we talked about it over a couple of years, and then he came. So glad to talk to you more.
It's true. It's true. And thanks be to God for it. Yeah, really. So yeah, as we talk tonight, we're going to talk about the purpose of the MA program in human rights that you lead up, Professor Saunders, why it's so relevant today, why it's so needed. We're going to talk about the curriculum, the advantages the program offers professionally, and how you benefit even more broadly, as well as the admission requirements and that kind of thing. So if, as you're listening to this, if you're with us live, feel free to submit questions, and we'll address those toward the end of our conversation. And of course, you may be watching this after the fact because we're going to make the conversational video available on our website afterwards.
Yeah,
So,
let's
Professor Saunders, we
say
kind of,
that. Let's say, Tom, just because I was sitting here thinking about it, just to tap it to the end of what you said. So the website is mahumanrights.com. That's the simplest thing in the world to remember. It's a Master of Arts in Human Rights. So it's mahumanrights, one word.com. And you go there, you'll be on our website. And, if you hear things today, you're not quite sure what we meant, et cetera, you can go to the webpage and you can send me an email if you're confused about something or need additional information.
that's right. That's right. Yeah. So, let's start off very simply, Professor. Why is there the need for such a program? What inspired the creation of this MA Human Rights program?
Well, um, you know, we right now, the Holy Father is, very sick in Rome and he may or may not survive. And we're praying for him, of course. But the Pope, the reason I mention him is because his predecessor, one back, John Paul II, was the great Pope of uh, the last century. And again, everybody listening, except me probably, is too young to remember the Cold War. I remember the Cold War. It was this division of Europe, well, the whole world between the West and the East. And the East was the communist bloc, and the West was the Western democracies. And John Paul II came from Poland, and he had suffered under the Nazis. And then after the Nazis fell, the Soviets took over and communism ruled his country. So when he became Pope in 1978, his first encyclical was looking to the great second millennium celebration. And it's Redemptor Hominis is the encyclical. And in that encyclical, he talked about the importance of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So my whole life and what I've done confirms to me that there is a very fruitful marriage between Catholic teaching or Christian teaching or theistic understanding and the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So I'm going to say a word about the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Again, you're all too young. Even I don't remember the end of the Second World War. I wasn't alive then. But at the end of the Second World War, and it is really important because the reason is there's a crisis in human rights today. So it's kind of my answer is a little bit multi. So there's a crisis today, and people don't know what human rights are, and they're advocating things that are contrary to human rights. They're advocating things that destroy the whole idea of human rights. But there was a consensus. The whole world agreed in 1948 to this Universal Declaration. And the reason they agreed was because World War II had almost destroyed the world. I mean, I know you didn't live through it. Trust me, think about it. There were double the number of innocent people killed to the number of soldiers and sailors killed. There was something like 50 million innocent people. There were the concentration camps you've heard about, I'm sure the Nazis did, but there were the same things in Asia where the Japanese Imperial Army did it, particularly to Chinese people. So there were these great devastation, and then we had nuclear weapons. So the first purpose, the reason the UN was founded was to prevent World War III. And if you look in its charter, it said the way we will do that, one way is we will promote development so that countries don't go to war over resources. But second of all, we will promote and observe and protect human rights. So The Universal Declaration was issued 3 years later. Now, anybody listening knows that the lingua franca of the age is human rights. I'm sure every student listening or anybody, you hear people all the time saying, I'm in favor of human rights. I mean, I bet you never hear anybody who says they're not in favor of human rights. The question is, what do you mean by human rights?
Right.
So that's what we try to help you to understand in this program, because there's a world crisis. And if we're going to, again, when I say Catholic or Christian teaching is congruent with these ideas, that means these are the fundamental things. So if we want to protect the fundamental things, we need to understand them in enough depth that we can enter into the public conversation like Tom can do in connection with his bishop and the different things he does communication wise, so that we want to be heard in the conversation. You can't persuade people if they don't hear you. And human rights is the lingua franca, so we're going to jump in and give the Catholic perspective.
Well, thanks so much, Professor. Yeah, I think that kind of segues well into maybe a little bit more specific question, which is, as you're saying, okay, everybody's talking about human rights. Who doesn't love human rights? Who would oppose human rights? Fair enough. But you're right. If you're out there, especially if you're searching for a program like this, you might find some other institutions. I know, some other institutions have them. They're not all Catholic schools. Um, Catholic University of America certainly is. Is that what makes this program different? Is it just the Catholic aspect, or is there more to it than that?
Well, to some extent, it makes it different, because I'm sad to report that we're the only program like ourselves anywhere that I know of in the whole world, certainly the United States. There's a lot of human rights programs, and people listening, you can Google and get all these human rights programs, and some of them are at religiously affiliated schools. They don't touch ours, because ours looks at uh, we we offer the distinctive of the Catholic perspective, which means an institution that's the oldest in the world and has reflected on these issues for all time. Because again, I said they're fundamental issues: life, religious freedom, the family, things like that. So that's what makes our program completely distinct. But we're also just notable because it's interdisciplinary program. So those of you who don't know Catholic University, it really is. It was founded by the U.S. bishops, I think in 1879 or something, and it was a graduate program for many, many years. And most of the prelates you've heard about in the U.S., people like Monsignor Shea, who's the president of the University of Mary, or Robert Barron, who's the Word on Fire Institute. If you've heard of any of those people, they were educated at Catholic University. So we have a pontifical established school of philosophy, and we have a pontifical established school of theology, and we have a pontifical established school of canon law. So, in other words, Catholic University is unique. So we take advantage of these incredible professors, and they come together through what Tom mentioned before, the Institute for Human Ecology, which, as Tom said, we seek to bring the intellectual riches of the Catholic tradition into public conversations and dialogue and stuff today. So the Institute has fellows. I'm a fellow too of the Institute, but like some of these philosophy professors or theology professors or law professors or political theory professors, they are the people who are part of the program and make it interdisciplinary. We have courses through by these great people. So I think that's another distinctive. And the last thing I'd mention for anybody, again, perhaps outside of the US, I mean, we are in Washington, D.C., and there's a lot of change going on in the US government right now, but you and I both know that in some ways, the center of the world is in Washington, D.C. That's where public policy is made. and where decisions about human rights have big impact on the rest of the world simply because the U.S. is such a big economic and military power. So those are some of the things that make our program very special.
Yeah, thanks so much, Professor. I think, you've touched on a lot of the points that drew me to the program initially. And I think in particular that aspect of the program is kind of leaven in our public policy discourse, but been in our broader public life. Um, you mentioned John Paul II and Redemptor Hominis. He has this quote, that what faith and reason are like, two wings upon which the human spirit rises to the contemplation of truth, I think it is.
Right.
It's sort of a famous quote of, this harmony of faith and reason. And, you mentioning the founding of CUA and the going back to that time. Well, so many of the beautiful things that our Holy Fathers say, you find have been said in a different way in years past, right? Going all the way back probably to our Lord. Um, but Pope Leo the 13th, who was the Pope behind Catholic University, and I was during his pontificate. He said something really similar that I think touches on some of the import of the human rights program, which is, he wrote at one point that, you know, natural law, right? This idea that's embedded in us, that we all know in our hearts, at a general level at least, the difference in right and wrong and what that should look like. In other words, that society, that rights are not just a matter of the victory of the stronger over the weak, or the triumph of the human will, right? Like I want this, and therefore it's a right because I have the power to make it so. Well, no, right? That's what JP2 is getting at with that quote of the harmony of faith and reason, and it's what Leo the 13th spoke to in his time. When he said that natural law alone was not enough. He said that states that law and policy really had to harmonize with kind of the truth of man, about man, I should say. I'm kind of paraphrasing, but he said, in other words, natural reason needs more because just by itself, because of our imperfectness, our corruptibility, our concupiscence, we're going to go astray. Even if we think we're reasoning in exactly the right way, we're going to end up in all sorts of blind alleys. So I think there's so much depth there that I appreciate you speaking to. Um, another saint, John Paul II is a saint, certainly, but your program in human rights, you've entrusted to the care of a particular saint, Saint
Yeah.
Josephine Bakhita, as well as John Paul II and Mother Teresa. Why is that?
Yeah. I want to show people, you can see this. This is a flyer for our program. And you see there's John Paul II and Mother Teresa. So there are really three saints that I consider the kind of foundation of our program. And they're these two. Now, I'm amazed and saddened, and maybe some people listening are like this. They haven't read John Paul II. If you haven't read John Paul II, you're not educated. But if you're not educated, you'll read him in our program, I guarantee you. He is the great Pope, like I said, really of the last century. John Paul, many people call him the Great. And he particularly led in this engagement with a totalitarianism that denied human dignity and human freedom, always, though, cautioning about the purpose of human freedom is to order itself to truth, not to just be free in the sense of rampaging chaos, but to order yourself to the truth. And this little lady right here, she, if you don't know Mother Teresa of Calcutta, again, go online and start reading about her. She, she exemplifies the Catholic part of this in particular because she helped people who, by a kind of cold rational calculus, you would say are unimportant people. I mean, they're unimportant because they own nothing, they know no one, and they're soon to die. She started a whole order to help those people. She picked up people on the streets of Calcutta who were dying. So these are two of them, and then the third one is Bakhita, um, the saint from Sudan, who is the patron saint against trafficking for the Catholic Church, and is the patron of our program. kind of the first of all of these three. And my formative days in human rights were really, if you look at this, I mean, I know you can't see it much, but it's a movie poster. And I set up a human rights organization that worked in Sudan, which is, if the listener doesn't know, it's south of Egypt in Africa. And it was a huge country. And there was persecution and genocide that was going on there. Actually, I'll show you this if you're watching. This is a little boy who was taken in slavery.
Mhm.
Now, we're not talking about 100 years ago. I mean, we're talking about 20 years ago. We're not talking, this is recent. And so
Yeah.
this was from a huge part of the country. And I worked with a Roman Catholic bishop from that diocese. The diocese, by the way, was bigger than the country of Italy. Pretty big.
Some good context.
Yeah. And Bakita was from Sudan. Now, Bakita was taken as a slave in about 1870s or around that time. She was a little girl. She was stolen from her parents and sold into slavery and treated worse than any animal. But she ended up in Rome, and I mean, not in Rome, in Italy, and really through her own insistence, she wanted to learn more about the Catholic faith because she would say later that she had met this God in the bush, but she didn't know his name, and she found his name there because the people who owned her sent their daughter to get instruction in the faith, and she went with them, with the girl, and once she met Jesus, she wasn't going to be sent back to be a slave. And actually the the great Archbishop Cardinal of Venice weighed in on her side, and she was freed. Anyway, so that's a long story, but the point is she's from that point of time. But the slavery that was going on then was also going on when we were involved. And I met, in the sense of spiritually, and I became acquainted with her when I was going into Sudan around the year 2000. And so
That's beautiful.
if you ever read her story, she is saint par excellence because she completely forgives all her tormentors and the kidnappers. And, that's pretty tough. I don't know if I could do that, but that's why this is why we need to have her. We have those three great saints. And I tell students, you can really learn about human rights and really, in a sense, everything you need to know from those three saints.
That's beautiful. Yeah. Her story is, I mean, it's just every life of a saint is amazing in some way, but hers is a particularly wonderful testimony and fitting for the program. Well, we'll talk more in a few minutes about kind of the program itself academically and advising wise and so forth. But we're in the United States. This is America, Professor. We got to talk about the professional advantages. We got to talk about
That's right.
careers and jobs and kind of things. What are the benefits?
Well, this is an unconventional program. I mean, I doubt that any, there's lots of law schools, there's lots of PhD programs, there's lots of blah, blah, blah. This one doesn't slot in, it's not a pre-law, it's not a pre-PhD, although as you proved, Tom, if you get you get your master's degree through our program, you can go right on to PhD study. But what I think is, first, you learn about rights from the Catholic or Christian or theistic perspective. You realize you learn the importance of God in this equation, and you learn about a deeper understanding of values, like life, that they're not political slogans for a fist fight. There's no conversation. There's so many conversations about rights that are fraudulent because the premises are absurd. I mean, there are no rights unless everybody possesses those rights. They are either equal or non-existent. Now, at least half of society around the world, maybe more, disagrees with what I've said. But I am happy to engage with those people because I know I'm right and they're wrong. You can't extend protection of human rights just to your friends, because that means when you're not in power, the other people can remove them from your friends. So you have to, whatever the truth is about rights, it applies to every human being. So you will learn that. You'll learn how to make arguments. You'll learn first how to think about it in a deep way so that you can make compelling arguments. You will we're growing alumni networks and stuff, and through the alumni networks, and you'll meet people and you may find job opportunities that way. We also, because I've been in Washington, D.C. for a long time doing this kind of work, I have a network, all pretty massive network, and a massive network in the human rights world. So we bring in people in the fall from human rights organizations to talk about what they do so the students can start thinking about, because I don't expect anybody listening to kind of know the whole human rights world. I mean, it would be amazing if you did. So part is we want you to learn of things maybe you didn't know about, and maybe then the Holy Spirit says to you, that's what I want you to do. And then you do that. And you hear about how people's lives have unfolded, how they've tried to follow the Holy Spirit in their work, and where that has led them to do. So you make connections and you learn stories and you get the skills, and particularly the thinking and the articulation, I think, that are so important. One other thing that's, I think, essentially unique of our program is we do have some law classes. Now you're not a law student in in the U.S. That's very tightly regulated because of various requirements of the law profession. But we have the privilege to take some courses in law so that you can understand things like the international legal order, the structure of human rights protections around the world. So I think that's an advantage too. So I would say one of the advantages of the program is it gives you a lot of flexibility. If you know exactly what you want to do, and you're a student of mine, you can also tell me what that is, and we can try to craft particular programs. I mean, this is an intense program, but it's only 10 classes. So, but if you have a particular interest, particularly with the paper you write in the end, we can. This semester I have several students, and they're doing things just like that.
I think it's beautiful too, the access. You mentioned your professional network and so forth. But at a lot of programs, and maybe this is me speaking autobiographically from having gone somewhere like Penn State for undergrad, but at a lot of places, despite their marketing material, you really are a number. You're one of 10,000, 20,000, 30,000 students that a very small cadre of advisors or professors are able to interface with. Uh, but at CUA, and particularly in the MA Human Rights program, it's a intentional cohort, and each of us, in the cohort I went through, Professor, we all have the ability to really form a deep relationship with each other, but also with you. I mean, I think your availability and the ability to have conversations and to go on kind of site visits throughout the course of the program really is a distinctive aspect of it. That it does have professional consequences because you're seeing how the work of human rights translates professionally in terms of NGOs and other organizations. So
Yeah, Tom. Yeah, I'm glad you mentioned the cohort part. the way this program is envisioned is 5, 6, 7 students, something like that, every year, and they come in as a group. So we call that a cohort. And it's for if you're full time, it's intensive. You have 5 classes each semester. Um, so most in graduate school, you usually have 3 classes, but in our program, you have 5 because you're going to finish in a year. Now, I want to put in parentheses for anybody listening, we do have part-time options. And actually this year, Tom, it's interesting. We're going to have uh, full-time and part-time graduates, and we're going to have more part-time graduates who finish this year than full-time. But if you're a full-time student, and by the way, just before I forget, if you can be part-time, even to the extent of 1 course per semester, that'll take you 5 years. But I have a couple of students who are doing that because they're working, full-time, and they get permission, or, a lot of employers want you to get graduate degrees. And, um, they get enough time off to do 1 course a semester. So, but if you're full-time and you're doing 5 full-time courses, you're going to be doing them with the same group of people. So that's a cohort. You get to know one another, like Tom said. You get to know all your professors very well, uh, and they think of you. Here's the human rights group, and you get to know me very well, and I am always available and trying to help you. Um, I mean, it's an intense experience, but I think, like Tom said, I think that's very helpful. You're not like wandering through a program with nobody else. I mean, this way we also do it for cross fertilization. Like Tom has an idea and somebody else in his cohort has an idea and they're talking about this and they say, how does that relate? Well, what do you think about that compared to this other course where Professor so and so said such and such? And it really, I think, enriches the whole experience.
It did certainly, yeah, it did certainly in my experience. Um, let's talk about, I know you've got you mentioned again your network, but you've also got an advisory board for the program.
Yeah, this is something, I'll just show this again, and you can see it at the web page. But and again, I realize I'm a certain age, but these are pretty dadgum eminent people, and they're uh, Robert George from Princeton, um, probably one of the leading public intellectuals in the United States. Marianne Glendon of Harvard Law School, who is without question, the great human rights lawyer. And she was also the first woman to head a delegation for the Vatican many years
She's
ago.
got 2 great books. I remember we read A World Made New
Yeah,
and
about the
Rights
universal
Talk as
declaration.
a part of the program.
Yeah, yeah, she's a great
That's
scholar. She has, one of the problems I'm sure people listening, um, you might say, well, what are rights? Because I mean, we are confused in the culture. We don't know, and there's a lot of reasons for it. And she has a book kind of analyzing, explaining that. Um, and part again of our program is to help you understand what rights are, not what preferences are, not what wishes are, not what dreams of heaven are. What are your rights? Now, I mean, I'm a lawyer, I'm a human rights lawyer. I was educated in the law, but I'm also a Catholic, so I don't have certainly not an exclusively legal approach, but the law is very important because what a law means is if you have a right, I'm obligated to respect it. I'm obligated. And if I don't respect it, you can sue me. If you don't have a right, you just want something, I can ignore you. I can laugh at you. So you got to be careful about what rights are. And that's not just positive law. That's right. I mean, if again, any of you, this is about Aquinas, about what true rights are and which ones are and which ones aren't. But anyway, so we also have this guy, John Keown, who is a professor at Georgetown, and he's the leading authority, in my opinion, in the whole world on assisted suicide and euthanasia. So the human rights issue that is a tsunami Just over the horizon is assisted suicide. It is going to drown us. We don't have the money to pay for these aging people. That's the way we think. So we're going to encourage them to leave us by laws and practices and social attitudes that tell them their life isn't worth living. Anyway, I'm telling you that is coming. We're not having babies. The world is crashing on population. Therefore, there aren't workers to produce wealth to pay for the elderly. Healthcare expenses are through the roof. Assisted suicide is what many people are going to say the answer is. And they're going to say, I'm compassionate. It's not that I love these people, but their lives, they're old or they're sick or they're whatever. We don't believe that. Anyway, John Keown is the great expert. Then I have Kevin Flannery, who's professor at the Jesuit Gregorian University in Rome, a great philosopher. Tom Farr, who started the Religious Freedom Institute. Helen Alvaré, who is the great pro-life lawyer here in the United States. Monsignor Anthony Frontero, who was a Vatican diplomat. And in fact, this is another thing about my program. I have been blessed with an incredible number of experiences. I worked on many of the things that are basic human rights in various law cases and other things. And I was on the U.S. delegation to the UN when Monsignor Frontero was there on the Holy See delegation, and we were good friends and he is now in Washington, D.C., and he even participates in our classes, and he helped design the capstone class itself. So we have great people on our advisory board, and I'm sure you can't find that anywhere else.
So you mentioned, Professor, what kind of inspired your work in human rights, the points that you were in from John Paul II's Redemptor Hominis onward and as a lawyer and so forth. I'm wondering if you can share maybe one or two anecdotes from your various, advocacy efforts in life. I know, you've been at the United Nations and everywhere in between.
Well, it's interesting because one thing I do during the summer is I teach in Europe, and I teach in a program that was established by Michael Novak, who was, again, a great Catholic scholar. And his John Paul II was the Pope when the Berlin Wall or the Soviet Empire collapsed. And what he wrestled with in his great encyclical, Centesimus Annus, was how do you set up or structure, or how should a society be structured, a free society? So I teach that in Europe every summer. We wrestle with, now that we are post Soviet Empire, how do you structure a free society? What institutions matter? And that's similar to stuff I did at the UN, where we wrestled against this fight about false human rights is not an academic enterprise. It's got huge implications for ordinary people. I mean, in our program this year, I actually have a little flyer. I have a couple of folks from Africa, and one of whom's a priest. And if you look at what's called the third world or the developing world, um, they need various kinds of assistance to develop their economies, which is fine. Catholic teaching says we have obligations to others. It's all, how do you structure it, and what's appropriate and what's not appropriate is, and this is why part of what I was fighting at the UN, is structuring assistance in a way that undermines true human rights. So you say to somebody, oh yeah, we'll give you money if you do this thing, which I'm calling a right, they're calling a right, which isn't a right. And in fact, which undermines true human rights. So that's what I was doing at the UN. I filed briefs in this famous case I'm sure everybody's aware of, the Dobbs case that overturned Roe v. Wade, and worked many years to overturn that, because abortion is impossible to be a right. It's the negation of rights. And then the Sudan work in particular, I don't know if I finally finished this, but this is a poster for a film we did called War and Faith in Sudan. And I learned a lot because I mentioned the globe before, or the world. If you looked at the world in the year 2000, Sudan was a super big country. And if you look at it today, it's half as big as it was because there's a country called South Sudan. Um, we worked, I can go on and on about it, but the point is our human rights advocacy work resulted not only in the ending of the slavery and the genocide, but in the creation of a new country. So I have a lot of life experiences from that. And we made this happen because, through the Holy Spirit, I connected with people, Catholics in the Hollywood uh, realm, directors, writers, producers, and they got involved in this story. So you also learn in our program how to do human rights. We have a session in one of my classes about practical lessons from the Sudan advocacy, because again, you can know it and everything, but how do you do it? How do you make or try to make, or how do you move towards making a more just situation? Um, anyway, I can go on
Yeah,
and on and on, but
Professor, on that note, I mean, you mentioned the unborn, the Dobbs case, and a just society. Do you want to speak for a moment about your book, Unborn Human Life and Fundamental Rights?
yeah, I'll just actually I have a copy of it. If I think it's not a bestseller, but it's pretty good. Because one of the things I'm very proud about with this book, I actually have a concluding chapter by a guy named John Finnis, who is the world's greatest legal philosopher. But this book is all about, you know, the great issue of our age is abortion issue, because with this development in Africa, it's always undermined by abortion because the abortion people get involved and try to make development include abortion. And of course, it can't do that because abortion is contrary to human rights. And so the unborn human life, they have fundamental rights. And we looked at this book in the leading cases in various jurisdictions, talking about how misguided they were if they encouraged abortion or embryo destruction. Um, so it was a great privilege to do it. I mean, I'm sure everybody listening would probably agree with what I'm about to say, but sometimes people act like they'll say, well, Catholics, all they can do is talk about abortion. Wrong, 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 wrong. We talk about abortion because you won't shut up talking about anything else. And abortion is not a human right. It can never be a human right. It is a negation of human rights because it says the most innocent, weakest can be killed. It cannot be a human right. And that's not just me talking. This is the leading philosopher, legal philosopher, I think, since Thomas Aquinas. So I think it's a valuable book. It gives you the intellectual analysis of the situation.
Yeah, that's wonderful. Well, thanks very much. I think we talked pretty organically about some of the curriculum, the length of the program, the options in terms of full time or part time. So we could add any gloss that we may have missed on that. I will say I did the program full time, which was a year, or really, I mean, 9 months, and it was some of the best and most intense in a good way 9 months of my life, really, because you did get such depth, both academically um, and spiritually, as well as communally with the other people in the program. That said, I know there were part-time folks in the program, like you said, some doing it, like a class a semester or a little bit faster, and it was great. You form relationships there too. So there's two good ways to do it. I would encourage either. The curriculum that we had, I know it changes year to year, right, based on just what's being offered by CUA in any given semester, any given academic year. But at a high level, I mean, the mix of the curriculum was tremendous. It really is a unique interdisciplinary program in the sense that you get broadly, right, you get basically a Christian moral anthropology framework that helps you understand, okay, who did Jesus Christ say that humankind is, right? That's that Redemptor hominis, right? The Redeemer of man.
Mm.
You get that, but you get then immediately a very deep level of investigation into, okay, but what does that mean then for law? What does it mean, even a level lower or level higher for international relationships, international law, relations between states that have to protect human persons? And what does it mean theologically? What does it mean sociologically? So across the range, I mean, the program was so wonderfully interdisciplinary.
Yeah,
But I'm
and
sure you might have more to add.
philosophical and the political theory, just like you're saying. There's I think that sometimes things can be too specialized. Uh, Study can be too specialized. I think for human rights, particularly, you want to get all angles of it. So usually in any human rights program, you wouldn't get any theological insight, which means that's a very impoverished educational system. But some of them you wouldn't get, solid philosophical insight either, and you wouldn't have the opportunity to actually hear human rights lawyers talk about how the legal part of it. And these are all complementary. So I think of this old story of they talked about once the question used to be, why do we have four gospels? You know, because people said we should just have one, and there were actually efforts in the past to merge them all together. There was historical examples, but we have four, which gives us four angles on the same reality. And if you think about like a diamond or chandelier, and I'm standing here, I'm looking at it. Tom's standing over there, he's looking. You're over there, you're looking. Maybe there's something, you're higher or lower, or there's something in my way, or the light's shining a certain way. They're very complementary. Um, so that's the strength of the program. Um, I do want to mention, because I'm sure people are thinking about this, the costs of the program. Um, so we have uh, a special rate because we're considered a professional program, but it's not cheap. But we have, but the good news is we have scholarships, and although we don't have unending money for scholarships, which is if you're sitting out there and you're thinking, I might want to do this, this is why you should get past might and get started, because I have a scholarship pool of money that once it's exhausted, it's exhausted. So if you haven't applied, you need to apply. And I want to say before I forget, do you have to take the GRE? No. Go ahead and apply. Now, it might possibly be that, I mean, let me ask you, you should ask yourself this: did I do well as an undergraduate, or have I had work since I was an undergraduate that shows my intellectual abilities? If that's the case, we're not going to require GRE. So if you did well as an undergraduate, or you have done work since that demonstrates that you can do graduate level work in the United States, you're not going to have to do the GRE. But in any case, if you want to be in the program for next fall, you need to get the application going as soon as possible so that we have scholarships available. The scholarships, just so you know, vary quite a bit, and it depends on it as the saying is a matrix of need and merit. So if you did really well, if you're a superstar academically, that's good. But also if you have you're very poor, um, we can take that into account as well and give a bigger scholarship. So you just need to get started, because I can't predict in advance how much there might be. I will tell you that we make scholarships available in some amount for every student, unless the student doesn't need it, or we do have a student who came in one year after we were out of money and had enough money and paid her own way. But anyway, get started.
Yeah, no, that's great advice. The sooner the better is usually good advice, but especially with us. Um, so we talked about you mentioned the capstone course that's a part of the series. I know there's an internship component. How about things like, do people have to, do they have to take a language? Are there other requirements?
No, you don't have to do that while you're in the program. I mean, um, so the curriculum has some variation in it for various reasons. You can look at the website. We have a basic menu of about 20 courses, but I mean, we're not hung up on kind of rigid adherence to something. I mean, there may be a new class developed by one of my colleagues that I think is essential. In fact, there's probably a new one we will offer next fall having to do with this issue of international development. So, um, yeah, I think I thought about the language because we did have a student one year who was spoke French and was very interested in the development of rights tradition in France and did some original research and took an elective course in French political history, since the revolution of 1789. So if you have a special interest, you can get a course in that. But again, generally speaking, it's a co if you're full time, it's a cohort. So you're going to take all courses together, except maybe you will have an elective, or we usually require an internship. And the reason we require an internship is many reasons. One, it'll help you get a job because most people get jobs from places they know to begin with. And number two, it helps you to see how an organization works up close, and it helps you to begin networking. One of our students is looking forward to this kind of networking opportunities in Washington, D.C. among groups. They meet once a month and talk about, whatever issues it is. And in those meetings, you can meet somebody from an organization you maybe didn't even know existed, and then that can lead to a job. So it gives you practical experience also. So yes, we do have an internship component. I can waive that in some circumstances, particularly if there's an elective you're dying to take or something. But that the general program is 9 required courses plus an elective. One of them is, like Tom said, my capstone course, where Monsignor Frontero is also participates. And yeah, that's the basic lineup.
That's good. Well, yeah, Professor, I know we're coming to our last few minutes of conversation here. It's been a great one. We do have to address some questions, though. So let's get
Okay.
into it. The first question is about the capstone course, which is just what does the capstone course look like? Is there a thesis requirement?
The capstone course is called that because I teach this course to bring together all these threads, to bring together the law, the international law part, the Catholic encyclicals, particularly of John Paul II and Pope Benedict. And by the way, I'm so proud of this. I have to mention this. Um, is it Bakita? So this is the Jubilee Year of Hope. Read Benedict Space Salvi. She is the example of Christian hope for the whole church. And it's a great encyclical. So we read so we bring those encyclicals, international law, these various things I've been involved in, particularly like those development fights internationally, as well as the fight against abortion here in the United States. And so we bring together the politics, we bring together the philosophy. I mean, Kevin Flannery teaches a class for us. Robert George sometimes teaches a class for us in philosophy. So we bring all those threads together. So that's the capstone class. It does have a paper requirement. It's not technically a thesis, but it's a 25-page paper on a topic that I approve, but you select. So if you have an issue you're very interested in, uh, and you show me that you can look at it, you show me through your bibliography that you're going to look into Catholic resources as well as others, I'm probably going to approve it. So,
All right. The second question we got for you here is, do I have to be a Catholic to do this program at Catholic University?
yeah, good question. The answer no. But um, for instance, I've had a Muslim woman, um, and I've had Protestants take it. The only thing that's required is that you are interested in learning the Catholic perspective. It's not it's not about conversion or learning the catechism of the Catholic Church, but the Catholic contribution to the human rights analysis is unparalleled in world history. And I say that it's a 2,000-year-old institution, and these moral questions have been wrestled with all along. And it was with Leo, as Tom was saying, in the 1870s, who started what we call the Catholic social teaching, where the popes particularly started looking at issues like um, workers' rights, and it's fascinating. So if you're interested in that intellectually, um, then you're welcome. You don't have to be a Catholic.
All right. And the last question we have for you here is concerning the professors and the courses, which is, are all the professors from Catholic University, and are there courses that can be transferred in, or are there courses that you take during the program that could also count if you were to continue on in another program at CUA?
Tom, maybe you can answer the last part of that. I'm not sure how a course you took for me would count towards another degree.
Sure. Yeah. So, yeah, I mean, in my case, going on to do the politics PhD afterward, there were some, you mentioned some of the philosophy courses, for instance, that did transfer. Like we took a great course on natural rights and natural law. There was a course on basically anthropology course that transferred on who is man, a bioethics course. So there were some, not 100% of them, but definitely in my case there were some that transferred into the PhD program. And that was kind of a choose your own adventure thing, in the sense that wasn't advertised. That was an opportunity that came about just through conversation with others at CUA, and I felt called to enter that program and give it a shot. But I know there are other paths as well. So I would
Yeah.
imagine in many cases that at least a few could transfer.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing is, look, I have super good relations with every school at Catholic University because the deans of those schools are involved in my program. So, I mean, it's going to be a very generous way of looking at it. And you will qualify, for the PhD study, say in philosophy, which is very difficult to get into if you have been through my program. What was the first part of that question? I don't know if I heard the first part of that.
Oh, concerning the professors, so are all these CUA professors, and are
Well,
any course?
y- yeah, they're all CUA professors. Um, Although sometimes, there might be, for instance, there's a professor right now who was at the Lateran in Rome and is an Italian, and he's here for a semester at Catholic University, and he's going to come in and teach a class for me. So I take full advantage of bringing in folks like that. And like I said before, Robert George, who's not a Catholic, he's at Princeton. He taught a course. Taught a class. Kevin Flannery, uh, who is in Rome, taught a class. So they're not literally all Catholic University professors. They by and large are, but we have guest lectures of tip top people.
Well, Professor, this has been a great conversation. I appreciate all you shared about the program, and I hope those watching, whether with us live or who view later, will feel inspired to give this a shot. It is a life-changing opportunity.
Visit
Well,
the webpage and send us a question if you still have questions. But if you're interested, really, you
yeah,
better get going.
Yeah, you mentioned mahumanrights.com, or you could go to catholic.edu and find the program there too. And again, yeah, Professor Saunders, such a pleasure to speak with you today. Thanks for all you're
Great to
doing.
see you, Tom. So everybody listening, be like Tom.
You make me blush.